The following episode may contain descriptions of ritual violence, sexual abuse, and/or child abuse. Listener discretion is advised. It can be hard to tell fact from fiction, especially when a book is marketed as fact and becomes a popular read, or even gets onto the bestseller list. During the 70s and 80s, there was a number of books that were marketed as quote-unquote true stories that told of children being taken by cults, children being sexually assaulted by cult members, and being sacrificed in the name of the devil. In this episode, we will look at a few of the better-known books and authors and explore the themes in these books, and how some of the authors were forced to admit that their books were a complete fabrication.
Ritualistic Podcast, Season 2, The Satanic Panic.
666. That's worship of the devil.
They use blood in their ritual.
Michael Alfred Warnke was born to Alfred and Louise Warnke on the 19th of November 1942 in Tennessee. In 1955, Mike's mother was killed in a car accident, and tragedy again struck when in 1958 his father died, leaving Mike an orphan. After his father's death, Mike was put into the care of two aunts in Tennessee, and later on he lived with his father's half-sister and her husband in California. In his 1972 book, The Satan Seller, Warnke, with the help of David Balsiger and Les Jones, told Warnke's life story. The book claims that in 1965, Mike Warnke became a Satanist after dropping out of college. He rose to the rank of high priest, participating in sex orgies, drugs, alcohol, conducting satanic rituals, summoning demons, kidnapping, rape, and his heroin overdose. The book goes on to detail how in 1966, Warnke converted to Christianity while serving the United States Navy as a hospital corpsman, and how he was shot in Vietnam and participated in heroic rescues, and ends with his happily ever after living in California with his first wife Sue. After the release of The Satan Seller, it became a hit, selling 3 million copies and topping the religious bestseller list, with Mike becoming a popular speaker, traveling the United States and talking to a majority Christian audience about his experiences as a satanic high priest and how he found God. Mike didn't act very Christian, having an affair with Carol Alberti, who would become his second wife after his divorce from his first wife Sue in 1975. Mike would go on to become ordained in the Syro-Chaldean Church and move his family to Denver, Colorado, where he would lead his congregation. In 1975, Warnke released his first album, a spoken word piece about his time as a Satanist and conversion to Christianity. This fame would continue through the remainder of the 70s and 80s, including multiple magazine covers, many Christian comedy album releases under his own label, and on the label Dayspring, a divorce from Carol in 1975, and subsequent marriage to Rose Hall in 1980. During the 1980s, Warnke's claims became more and more outlandish, claiming he had 2 master's degrees and a doctorate in philosophy, as well as in 1983 being ordained as a bishop by Bishop Richard Morrill of the Byzantine Catholic Church, thus giving him more credibility. Mike Warnke was one of the main subjects of the May 16, 1985 primetime episode of ABC's 2020 television show called The Devil Worshippers. This episode also contained segments on the satanic murderers Ricky Casso, Jimmy Triano, and Scott Waterhouse, a segment on the Church of Satan and its founder Anton LaVey, and police officers. Warnke discussed clothing, ceremonies, and a scar he supposedly got from cutting himself to use his blood in the satanic rituals. But it wasn't all fame and recognition for Warnke. In 1991, Cornerstone magazine, an evangelical Christian publication, commenced an investigation led by journalists Mike Hartenstein and John Trott. During the years-long investigation, the men looked into his time in the military, injuries from Vietnam, and uncovered photographs taken during the time he claimed to be in the satanic cult, and its high priest, showing him to be a regular Joe Square, and debunked claims that he attended a satanic ritual with Charles Manson, who was actually in prison at the time that Warnke claimed the ritual happened. In June 1992, during the Christian Booksellers Association convention, Cornerstone revealed their explosive article, and forced the hand of Warnke to admit that he had fabricated some of his claims. And within a few months, Warnke had been dropped from his label and closed the doors of his ministries. Whilst it has been debunked, Warnke still claimed that he was part of a satanic cult, but had embellished his story in the early 2000s, but no longer references that part of his life on his official site. Laurel Rose Wilson was born on August 18, 1941, at St. Joseph's Hospital in Washington State, to unwed mother Marion Disbrow, and adopted at birth by Dr. Frank Cole Wilson and Rose Gray Wilson. Rose Wilson was the granddaughter of Polish Catholic immigrant Anton Grabowski and his wife Rosario. Laurel would later take the last name Grabowski. Frank, who was prone to rage-filled outbursts, walked out on the family in 1950, when Laurel was only 9 years old, leaving her with her rage-prone mother and her sister Willow. As a child, Laurel Rose Wilson was a talented musician, playing the piano, clarinet, the flute, and often entering singing competitions. Laurel had a somewhat troubled life as a teenager, reportedly making many claims of victimization and attempting self-harm and threatening to commit suicide. After being involved in a car accident in high school and injuring her ankle, Laurel ran away from home, staying in Raymond Juvenile Hall in Tacoma, before moving to live with her father in San Bernardino, California. Unhappy with San Bernardino, she moved back to live with her mother, before moving again to live with her sister Willow. By the age of 17, she was making claims of being sexually abused by Willow's husband, which was disproven, with Willow being advised by a psychiatrist not to allow her to live with them anymore. Laurel graduated from King's Garden School and enrolled in university. In the coming years, Laurel made claims, including that she was being sexually abused by college staff, also by her father, being forced into prostitution, and attempted suicide, although later she would admit that these stories were made up to gain attention. Whilst in college, Lauren lived for a short time with Billy and Norman Gordon, who would also encounter a number of incidents, including one where Laurel broke a vase before cutting herself and lunging for Norman's throat. After that, Laurel completed a degree at the University of Redlands before she began a career as a teacher, and became well known in the evangelical Christian churches of Bakersfield, California as a vocalist and pianist. In 1966, after a short courtship, Laurel got married to Frank Austin, the son of a Pentecostal minister. The marriage didn't last long though, and after a short couple of months on May 17, 1966, the couple agreed to an annulment. During the late 60s and the 70s, Laurel worked in a number of jobs, including being a public school music teacher and working as a counsellor, as well as being in a Christian musical group, and continued to tell stories and make accusations against a number of people. In the mid-1980s, Bakersfield was swept up in the Satanic Panic, with the Kern County child care abuse scandals taking place. At the time, Laurel was teaching piano and happened to be teaching the child of one of the investigating officers. It was after this that she began to include satanic abuse in her stories. Soon after, Laurel Rose Wilson changed her name to Lauren Stratford, and in 1988 published her book Satan's Underground, the first in a series of books that purported to be a true account of her life as a victim of child abuse and as a baby breeder for a satanic cult. Her story of a life captive to Satanists and forced to endure sexual and psychological abuse, and also being part of evil satanic rituals. During the purported captive life, she held on to her strong faith in God. Lauren was involved in TV appearances, and even told a story to the parents of the McMartin preschool children at the height of the McMartin scandal, with those who saw recordings of her story believing she was not being truthful. In 1989, Cornerstone uncovered documents that showed who Lauren Stratford really was, and exposed her and her lies to the world, finding there was no abuse, no cult, and she was not a victim. Bob and Gretchen Passatino and John Trott, who investigated Lauren, had tried to corroborate her story and contacted her family and friends and got the same story from them that no one had tried to verify with them before. In confronting her publisher, Harvest House, and asking them to provide proof that they had vetted Lauren's story, the publisher stated, quote, "They had a 3-part test. 1. Several staff members talked with Laurel at different times and got the same stories from her, and all of the staff members were impressed with her sincerity. 2. They talked with experts who claimed that such things have happened to others, and 3. They gathered character references for her from her supporters." And despite this, and both Lauren and her publisher admitting to some false claims in 1992, Satan's Silence was republished, and a second book was also published under a different publisher. The second book, called I Know You're Hurting, Living Through Emotional Pain, covers the topic of satanic ritual abuse and how learning about her faith helped her recover from it. In 1993, her third book, Stripped Naked, was published. Stripped Naked details her alternate personalities that she claimed were discovered while working through her pain, and how these alters were programmed by the satanic cult to serve the cult's own needs. But this wasn't the end of controversy for Lauren. In 1994, she filed for bankruptcy before developing another story, this time using the last name of her grandfather and taking on the alias Laura Grabowski to make the claim that she was a Holocaust survivor, claiming such things as being experimented on by Dr. Mengele in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and then living in Krakow orphanage until she was adopted by American parents in 1950, and collecting thousands in donations intended for real Holocaust survivors. Having lived a life of lies and controversy, Lauren Stratford died on April 8, 2002. A quote from a republished article from October 13, 1999, Cornerstone, said this about the original article. A quote from a republished article from October 13, 1999. Cornerstone said this about the original article. Our investigation, published in late 1989, was the first in-depth analysis of a particular testimony of satanic ritual abuse. It provided the first concrete evidence that at least some such stories could be the result of troubled minds, bad therapy, and credulity regarding Satanism, as not the result of actual events. Michelle Remembers was an important book of the Satanic Panic era, published in 1980 by Pocket Books, and written by Michelle Smith and Dr. Lawrence Pazder. The book details some of the 600 hours of sessions that led to recovered memories of satanic ritual abuse that Michelle supposedly suffered from as a 5-year-old girl in 1954 through 1955. The book was often cited throughout the Satanic Panic as proof of satanic ritual abuse. Dr. Pazder coined the phrase, and would appear on Geraldo Rivera's special, Exposing Satan's Underground, as an expert. Lawrence Pazder was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada on April 30th, 1936. Was a Canadian psychiatrist who studied medicine at the University of Alberta in 1961 and obtained a diploma in tropical medicine from the University of Liverpool in 1962, and also gained the Specialist in Psychiatry certificate and diploma in psychological medicine from McGill University in 1971. In 1976, Dr. Pazder was a devout Catholic, married to wife Marilyn with 4 children. He had founded the Anawim Companions Society Day Home to assist the homeless and underprivileged of Victoria, British Columbia. Dr. Pazder also worked in Africa for a time. Michelle Smith became Dr. Pazder's patient in 1973, but in 1976 began suffering from depression after a miscarriage. At the time, Michelle was married to Doug Smith. According to the book, Michelle became convinced that there was more, deep down inside, that was nagging her. With the help of Dr. Pazder, the two undertook treatment to bring it to the surface. An early session saw Michelle describe to Pazder a ritual which she alleges occurred when she was a 5-year-old child. She says that possibly 13 people were present, and describes how a robed priest held her by the neck and crotch and repeatedly points her to the different points of the compass. He then flips her in somersaults over and over again. Michelle then says they laid her down and anointed her with some sticky, foul-smelling substance. The priestess then takes coloured sticks, wraps them on the floor, and then drops them, closely examining the pattern they make. She then takes the sticks and inserts them one by one in Michelle's rectum. They lay Michelle naked on an altar, set up on a bureau in a semicircle of candles. Michelle then says that a priest named Malachi made a line down the center of her face with a knife, and then painted half of her face red and the other half of her face white. She goes on to describe them as moaning like they had stomach aches before they abruptly leave the room. In another recalled memory, she described being imprisoned inside a hollow statue of Satan by the cult and a lady who was possessed, who put a dead baby and snakes inside the statue with her. While she is trapped inside the statue, the cult hold a ceremony with other children. Michelle manages to escape the statue, which maddens the possessed woman, who then throws Michelle onto a bed and vomits all over her before she is put back in the statue by the cult members, who then fill it with small red spiders. Another ritual described in the book was during 1955, when Michelle remembered a ritual to summon the devil, lasting 81 days, during which she was subjected to the devil's tail wrapped around her neck. She witnessed numerous murders, had baby's blood speared over her, and was subjected to tremendous physical and psychological torture. And at the end of this ritual, Jesus, Mary, and Archangel Michael came to save her, and removed the scars of her torture, and removed her memories until, quote, the time was right. In the book, Michelle's family are given pseudonyms. Her parents were given the names Eric and Jessica Harding, a couple who were disappointed when Michelle was born female, as they wanted a son, and described them as having a stormy marriage, with their father prone to drunken rage, often beating her mother, whilst Michelle cowered in bed, fearing her mother might be killed. According to the book, at age 14, when her mother died of cancer, Michelle's father took off, and her maternal grandfather Cyrus Gilbert became her guardian and sent her off to Catholic boarding school. During the period of treatment, Michelle and Dr. Pazder came quite close, and in 1977, Dr. Pazder divorced his wife Marilyn, and shortly after that, Michelle and Lawrence were married. The couple wrote and toured the book after it was published, and after a few years it would come out due to investigative reporting that Michelle was not telling the full truth. Michelle Proby, born on September 27, 1949 in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, the second daughter of three to Jack and Virginia Proby. During her formative years, she would go to church every Sunday with her mother Victoria, and was confirmed into the Catholic Church with her younger sister Cheryl and older sister Tertia. Her father Jack admits he was not the perfect father, that his relationship with Michelle's mother Victoria, who passed away from cancer in 1963, was at times difficult, but denies that anything described in the book actually happened. In Canadian news magazine Maclean's, dated October 27, 1980, Jack Proby was interviewed by Paul Gresco, and he had the following to say about the book and the family. It was the worst pack of lies a little girl could ever make up. The book took me 4 months to read, and I cried all the time. I kept saying to myself, dear God, how could anyone do this to their dead mother? There was never a woman on this earth who worked harder for her daughters. There was no hanky-panky or devil worshipping. I asked my lawyer if I could sue them. He said I would win, but it would cost me $5,000. So instead, I took out a notice of intent against their publisher, which meant if they ever went beyond a literary contract, I would sue. That meant they could not get the movie deal. He cited 3 things in the book, which did in fact happen, however not as Michelle remembers. The first was that Michelle did in fact attend church, contrary to the book. The second was that Michelle was poisoned twice as a child, not by a satanic cult, but as a result of drinking a mixture of turpentine and paint that Jack was using to wash paintbrushes with, and the second as a result of eating shoe polish. The third is a car accident described in the book. This never happened to Michelle, but the family did see a horrific fatal car accident whilst on an outing once. The sight of one of the accident victims laying in the middle of the road with horrific injuries frightened Michelle, and she started to scream and could not be comforted. Michelle's father remarried, and his second wife Emily Jean Proby passed away in 1991. A number of investigative reports and a book were published debunking Michelle Remembers. One article written by Kerr Coulihan compared rituals and ceremonies described in the book to African and Chinese religious rituals, and other things described in the book are compared to The Exorcist. Many people believe that these so-called repressed memories were fabricated, for whatever reason, by Michelle, who may have been led in some instances by Pazder. Recovered memory therapy has long been believed to be unreliable due to the malleability of human memories over time, and the possibility of being led by a therapist to false memories through suggestion. Michelle and Dr. Pazder remained married, with Michelle working in Dr. Pazder's practice. Dr. Pazder passed away suddenly of a heart attack in 2004. Chick tracts are a tool for evangelical Christians to evangelize others. Each tract was a cartoon or comic ranging from a single cell through to small booklets a dozen pages in length. These tracts cover many topics, with some of the more controversial ones being about abortion and giving away your soul to Satan. Jack Chick was born on April 13, 1924, in Los Angeles, California, to Thomas and Pauline Chick. As he grew up, it was obvious from an early age that he had a love of drawing and art, often choosing to draw at school rather than following lessons being taught. Being creative type, Jack began to enjoy acting in plays and starred in several high school plays, even winning a scholarship to the Pasadena Playhouse in 1942, before being drafted into the US Army during World War II, serving in the Pacific over 3 years from February 43, with tours of duty in the Philippines, New Guinea, Australia, and Japan as a cryptographer. Upon his return to civilian life, Jack returned to the Pasadena Playhouse to continue his scholarship, where he met Lola Lynn Priddle, a Canadian immigrant from a devoted religious family. It was on his honeymoon with Lola to Canada, visiting the Priddle family, that Jack was introduced to and spent time listening to the Old-Fashioned Revival Hour, hosted by evangelist radio minister Charles E. Fuller, and Jack was converted. Jack illustrated the syndicated cartoon Times Have Changed for a number of years before finding a way to help him spread his truth. In 1960, whilst working in advertising for aerospace engineering company Astro Science Corporation, he received an $800 loan from his credit union and financed the publishing of the first tract, Why No Revival, and with the help of his Christian boss, published its follow-up in 1962, A Demon's Nightmare, both of which were popular among missionaries and churches, but weren't stocked in bookstores, as some bookstores saw presenting the gospel through cartoons to be blasphemous. At a Christian business meeting, he learned through Christian radio host Bob Hammond how Maoist propaganda was disseminated in China through small cartoon booklets, and set about utilizing this technique to evangelize others. At the time, he was partaking in prison ministry and created a cartoon flipbook to assist his ministry presentations. This flipbook was called This Was Your Life, which was turned into a tract and has gone on to be translated into 100 different languages. With popularity building for Chick tracts, Jack founded Chick Publications, based in Rancho Cucamonga, California, to continue his work. Chick illustrated the tracts exclusively until 1972, when he hired fellow illustrator Fred Carter, who worked anonymously for Chick Publications for 2 years before being credited. Chick Publications have created many controversial tracts, with themes including the occult, devil worship, homosexuality, feminism, the Catholic Church, and many featuring anti-Semitic characters with over-exaggerated noses. One series included 6 tracts, featuring anti-Catholic activist Alberto Rivera, who claimed he was a former Jesuit before converting to fundamentalist Protestant and making outlandish claims about the Vatican and Jesuits. Rivera, like Mike Warnke and Laurel Rose Wilson, was outed as a fake by Cornerstone magazine expose. Chick tracts have had a hand in the Satanic Panic through the 70s and into the 80s, with tracts such as The Contract, where a struggling farmer is given riches and success in return for his soul by Satan, just one of the many tracts about Satanism. Jack Chick died on October 23, 2016, aged 92, of a heart attack. Chick Publications continues to this day, with a catalogue of over 200 tracts which have been translated into more than 100 languages. Much of the information including this episode about Mike Warnke and Laura Rose Wilson came from the articles published by Cornerstone. Information on Jack Chick was hard to come by, so I had to rely mainly on the official story of Jack Chick's life from the Jack Chick Publishing website. Thank you for listening and for following us on social media. If you don't already follow us, you can find us by searching for Ritualistic Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and Twitter. If you wish to provide constructive feedback, feel free to email us on ritualisticpod@gmail.com. If you wish to donate to our research fund that helps us purchase books and other research materials, you can do so by sending it through PayPal and entering ritualisticpod@gmail.com or by donating through Coffee. www.ko-fi.com/ritualisticpodcast. Remember, you can subscribe for free to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Himalaya, or your favourite podcatcher, so you don't miss what's coming next. As always, stay safe, stay awesome, and see you next time.